Penn State football is in the thick of spring practice, so it's time for our final Blue White Illustrated Two-A-Day. That's where we preview two positions on the spring roster. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We're wrapping up with the offensive line and safeties. It's that time again, though. I'm here to remind you to click the like button and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated on YouTube so you don't miss anything from Penn State spring football coverage. Do you see how disappointed James Franklin looks when you don't hit that like button? Come on. The Penn State offensive line went from a huge problem in 2021 to a quality unit last season. This year, they have the chance to be a legitimate strength of the offense for the first time since 2019. Now, there's still a long way to go before that happens, and we'll outline some of the challenges that they face this spring. But before we get to that, let's start with the good news. Penn State has enough healthy bodies this year to put together a competitive practice and realistic spring game, according to Franklin.
The thing I think will be helpful is it's early to say this, but based on our numbers right now, we anticipate going back to a traditional spring game like we've had in the past. I know a lot of people have gone away from that. I think there's value in it. I also think that we're one of the unusual schools where when 75,000 people show up to watch a spring game, I'd like to be able to give them a spring game.
What offensive line coach Phil Trautwein has done in short order to restore not only talent, but depth to the roster has been very impressive. That doesn't mean this group is fully healthy at the moment, though. Franklin outlined that several starters won't begin the year practicing.
So Olu will be full go. Landon Tengwall, I think, will be full go by practice 3. We got a number of guys. They'll come out the first 2 practices and do kind of more individuals and jog throughs, individuals full speed, and then depending on how they do with those, then they'll have an opportunity by practice 3 to, the medical staff will determine, do we need to keep modifying them or are they in a good place? And then at center, Hunter is going to be in a competition with Dawkins. I think there's some other guys. I think Venga will take some center reps. I think Wormley, could take some center reps as well. Part of it is Hunter will also be one of those guys that starts out slightly modified for the first 2 practices to see how it goes.
Both Tengwall and Nourzad fought through injuries last season that hampered their playing time, but also their ability to produce when they were on the field. Nourzad has been pegged as the team's next starting center and missed a stretch of 2022 after he was rolled up on during the Ohio game in Week 2. Still, he came back and filled in for Tengwall, who he ultimately replaced when Tengwall went down with an injury before the Michigan game. But that's actually where the team's hope lies. Unlike last year, this group behind the 2 starters is deep and talented. We got flashes of it last year when they had to fill in for the injured unit down the stretch. Well, it's not ideal to lose your starters at any point in the year. It is bound to happen. J.B. Nelson played well in his redshirt season last year, giving up only 2 pressures, according to PFF, when facing game action. On the other side at right guard, redshirt Vega Ioane had a similar season, though his work came mostly in mop-up duty at the end of games. He recorded 0 pressures on 16 pass blocking snaps in 2022. Now, let's be clear. That's not enough to make any definitive conclusion on his skills, but he didn't play poorly, and that's always a great first step. More than that, Ioane stands out from the crowd in most situations. He arrived on campus at 335 pounds and has worked this offseason to get up to 352 on the official roster. Even if he doesn't play at that weight, he carries body mass well and moves much better than players that are his size. He'll likely fight for playing time at right guard behind Salim Wormley this year and is also part of the conversation at center behind Nourzad this spring. Either way, the veterans in front of him and Nelson will have to fight for every rep this spring, thanks to the depth and youth on the interior. At tackle, things are more optimistic than they've been in quite some time. Olu Fashanu put together an excellent season before suffering a season-ending injury in the final minutes of the loss to Ohio State. PFF tracked his 299 pass blocking attempts last season and found that he gave up 1 quarterback hit. The scary thing is, for Big Ten defensive linemen, he's just scratching the surface of his potential. Fashanu turned 20 in December and has another year in Penn State's weight training program to improve his already impressive play strength. As a pass protector, we saw that translate last year, controlling pass rushers and making up for mistakes in protection. However, that didn't show up in that dominating way in the run game. His tape was solid, but he didn't make any difference making blocks you'd associate with a first-round offensive tackle. For reference, PFF ranks his run blocking 22nd in the Big Ten among tackles from last season with 148 snaps. Offensive line coach Phil Trautwein has shown he can get the most out of linemen who put in the effort and work to technique and fundamentals. Unless Fashanu suffers an injury of some sort, he should have a shot at an All-American campaign next fall. But potentially the reason for more optimism is having a right tackle opposite of Fashanu. Just like on the interior, Penn State has legitimate competition at the second tackle spot on the roster. Veteran Caden Wallace also missed a large stretch of last season thanks to an injury that he suffered against Minnesota. He's back for one final year to show he's got what it takes to make the NFL. Now, Wallace struggled with specific blocks and some body types in pass rush during his time at Penn State, but he does bring a Big Ten level of talent and polish to the right tackle position. Behind him is last year's co-starter at left tackle, Drew Shelton. The freshman filled in for Fashanu last season, and despite being thrown into the fire way too early, he kept his head above water. He even began to flash some impressive run-blocking chops by bowl season. This year, he'll compete on the right side. When you count up all of those players, plus add in freshman Alex Birchmeier as a potential player, depending how spring goes, you'll see Penn State has great depth. They have 9 players along the front that have significant talent or starting experience. You could even push that to 10, depending on how this spring goes for some veteran depth players. The team hasn't had depth like this in years. If enough of them stay healthy, it might even lead towards a step forward in production. Now we'll come to our final roster spot, the safeties. While this group isn't as talented as some of the top-end units yet, it might be the deepest room on the defensive roster per capita. Veteran Keaton Ellis leads the room with junior Jalen Reed alongside him as the spring top-line starters. Ellis will likely remain at his field position while Reed manages the boundary safety job. However, last season Tig Brown played both positions throughout the year. If either of these two or any other player proves that they can handle the flexibility of playing multiple roles, defensive coordinator Manny Diaz won't hesitate to do that with that player. Not only did Brown play the safety role, but he also filled several critical roles in the defensive sub-packages on third down. He played the prowler role, which allowed him to react in coverage and play outside of structure instead of a traditional spot. He also blitzed and played in man coverage in the slot. This is another highly underrated position that's up for grabs this spring. One player that, at least on the surface, has the skills for that job description is Zachy Wheatley. The redshirt sophomore safety flashed during spring camp last year, causing a buzz about his potential to play in the fall. He continued his apt ability to find the ball during camp and the early part of last season. This year, he'll once again be a major factor in the field competition to push Ellis for playing time. But at 6'2", 194 pounds, he's got the frame and game to be a superstar in the secondary. The same is true for teammate KJ Winston. At 6'2", 204 pounds, a boundary safety entering his redshirt freshman season, things are promising. Winston is this year's hot name to make a big step forward in playing time behind Reed. With good speed and a frame to wreck ball carriers, Winston could be an all-around nightmare in the secondary. A wild card for the group is former Lackawanna safety Tyrese Mills. He transitioned to linebacker last year before an injury forced him to miss the season. He'll likely be a boundary player, but where he lands in the pecking order or what jobs he can take on third down will be interesting to follow this year. With veteran experience pushed by talented youth, the safety position is off to a hot start. After spring ball is over, Talented four-star recruits Dakari Nelson and King Mack join the group as well. Mack has the skills to play early if he can integrate into the system during the summer and fall. And even if he doesn't, this group is set up to once again provide a backstop to the defense. After sending 2 players to the NFL over the last 2 seasons, it seems that Penn State is reloading at safety. That does it for Penn State 2-A-Days. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. New members can sign up for just $10 and get 4 months of access. We'll be back with more great Penn State football coverage.